Howdy y'all, welcome back. I'm Chip of the Quarter Life Burnouts. This week I've found myself thinking a lot about Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. I can only wonder why. I know I'm a bit late to the discourse, but truth be told, I didn't really care until a few days ago when I watched Isaac OS's video about the quote-unquote controversy. Before seeing that video, I would see video titles of people furious that these ROMs were $20, and see videos where people attack the general public for purchasing these games. While I do think $20 is a steep price for a 20-year-old game that the company did almost no additional development to, when the only other legal alternative for people is buying a secondhand cartridge for $150, and that's assuming they even have a way of playing GBA cartridges, I do think a lot of this discourse blew the issue way out of proportion. These ROMs are just overpriced, but nobody's forcing you to buy them. It's especially weird because most of this sentiment seems to be coming from people who swear by emulation for playing games, and don't get me wrong, I think emulation is great, and I'm a believer that if a game isn't in circulation, then it's fair game to just grab a ROM because no money in buying it is actually going to the developers. Now that Nintendo's releasing these ROMs for purchase, that does kind of muddy those waters a bit. But I paid my $70 back in 2005 for both a copy of Fire Red and for Leaf Green. My conscience is clear. It's just really weird how this die-hard piracy crowd seemed always personally insulted that people would even think to purchase a game from Nintendo, let alone an old ROM that's easily piratable. I do want to say, this isn't people that are just interested in emulation for the sake of game preservation. This is just people who really like pirating Nintendo games. I'm not here to be like, leave the big billion-dollar corporation alone, but there's also better things to do with your time than hate on people for having fun. From what I've seen overall, the reception of these ROMs being available for purchase has been a net positive for people. I can't remember the last time there was a good new Pokemon game released. I'd probably say 2012 if I had to be precise. So there's a 14-year vacuum for experiencing why the Pokemon craze is what it has become. I mean, it didn't become the #1 grossing media franchise of all time for no reason. I'm seeing grown men older than me having slumber parties to gather around the living room TV and shiny hunt while slamming back beers and jamming out to the Pokemon anime theme song. I'm seeing young folks experience Pokemon for the first time through a Switch Lite and games that I grew up on. And best of all, I'm seeing young folks finally understand why we crotchety old men proclaimed Pokemon was just better back in the 2D era. The opportunity to play these games was always there, either through buying overpriced cartridges, reprints on Etsy, buying a retro handheld emulator preloaded with tons of games, or just downloading the ROM and playing how you saw fit. But I think a lot of folks forget that, especially when talking about emulation, most people either aren't tech savvy enough to know how to emulate games, feel that it's an ethical gray area they don't want to enter, that being pirating games, not emulating the games, or honestly just don't care enough to pirate and or emulate them. In terms of physical cartridges, they might not have a device to play the cartridges, don't want to spend 7 times the price of what we're complaining about for these ROMs for a cartridge, which probably needs the battery replaced, and probably feel sketched out buying a reprint, or don't even know that's an option. Having the ability to just purchase the game from the publisher that originally made the game and just play on current hardware is the no-brainer option for what has been demonstrated to be the majority of the player base. Don't forget, most people who play games, especially mass-market appeal games like Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA, and yes, even Pokemon, don't spend all their time watching gaming media on platforms like YouTube. They just punch in their credit card information, download the game, and then scroll on TikTok watching movies in 57 parts and unironically watch the NFL. These people aren't wrong for just wanting the path of least resistance to play what is an objectively incredible game. And probably don't even think about the fact the games were made 20 years ago in regards to the price being what it is, but are rather overjoyed it's a button press away on the console they already play and can now either relive their childhood or go on a new adventure they've always heard about. Personally, $20 is pretty steep for a 20-year-old game, which the only known development changes have been adding language censorship in a purely single-player game and providing all endgame mystery events as post-game content. But that's just my opinion. No shame to the folks who think that's a fair price. I mean, back in the day, I thought Pokemon Crystal on the 3DS eShop being $10 was overpriced, and that's honestly just for each individual to decide. Personally, I kind of think these things should be $5. When I first heard these games were coming to the eShop, I just really didn't care. I was glad the people who were excited could just download and play these games. I liked these games when they came out, but they weren't my go-to favorites. I've always felt like Gens 2 through 4 were peak Pokemon, but these games were really fun, and I did play a lot of Leaf Green when it came out. I'm also just the kind of person that prefers playing games on the original hardware they were designed for. I've bought an emulation handheld, and while I think it's nifty and fun for playing ROM hacks or niche games I could never justify the price of the secondhand market, the majority of the time I would just rather pop a cartridge or a disc into the original console for what I believe to be the optimal experience. Then, I don't know, like a week ago, I had the thought I haven't played these games in about 2 decades. And I used to play with my buddy Extra Shoddy and my next door neighbor, and we'd trade Pokemon and share stories from throughout the day with each other. It was just a really good time, and I'm thinking back on it fondly now. If I were to try and get a cartridge for one of these games, I'd be crazy because they're just not worth the price that they're going for these days. But what if he and I each got a copy on the Switch and we use it as a game to keep us in touch and occasionally trade with each other and battle with whatever teams we have at the time? That could be really fun, and it would give us a nostalgic way to routinely keep in touch with each other. And just as I was about to ask him if he'd want to get a copy for himself and we do this very plan, I saw that aforementioned video. There's no Wi-Fi capability in these ROMs. Games which, although they were originally designed for the GBA, did have some minor changes done to them before they were put to the Switch. A console that has Wi-Fi capabilities. And this just kind of baffles me. I'm by no means going to pretend I know what effort it would take to have the link cable functionality of these games simulated through Switch friend code access or whatever it would be. But this just feels like a huge missed opportunity for these ROMs, man. And for the price that's being asked of us to buy these games, this just feels like the least they could do to accumulate 20 years of technological progress since the fucking link cable. Is this a deal breaker for 99% of people? No. Well, probably not if my YouTube feed is anything to go off of. Is it a deal breaker for me? I'm honestly really not sure yet. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I kind of feel like that Squidward meme watching SpongeBob and Patrick having fun with these games. The sudden surge of love and discussion for these games reminded me that although I'm not a diehard Gen 1 fan, these games really were good, and I'd probably really have a good time reliving these on my Switch Lite. But for now, I think I'll hold off and just play the Pokemon games I have physically and appreciate all the joy these games have brought me over the years. Anyways, thanks for watching this week. I've been going down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out my ideal way to play Pokemon games, be it handheld emulators, cartridges, etc. And the secondhand market has really brought a downer on me, having sold some of my older games, like Leaf Green and Pokemon White 2. And also losing copies like Ruby, Silver, and Gold. That's kind of a funny sentence out of context. I would love to have these games physically again, but for these I may have to settle for emulation for the time being. Maybe if this channel gets some actual revenue, I can start adding back to my physical collection. Let me know down below what your thoughts on current Pokemon is, the Gen 1 ROM debacle on the eShop, or anything else I've talked about down in the comments. And I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. I'm uploading a reflection style video once a week and more experimental videos as I get around to editing them. So feel free to join the community if that interests you. Like the video if you enjoyed it, ignore all buttons if you didn't. And until next time, keep it tuned in.